probably belated Pride Month, everybody. If you're wondering where I've been for the past month, I fell into a black hole of data while researching for video ideas and ended up spending way too much time on a script that just didn't work out. It turns out that trying to summarize the events of an over 600-page book into a short script was a lot harder than I thought. But seeing as it was Pride Month, and that reading about LGBTQ plus history is something I do on a regular basis, we all have our hobbies, I thought this would be a great time to do a part 2 to my Pride Stories from Across History video, which nobody actually watched. Well, I doubt the other video would have been very popular either. Unsurprisingly, LGBTQ plus history isn't the easiest subject to research. Not only have large sections of the historical record been altered or erased, but a lot of the material that does exist was written by people with a very biblical view of the world, and therefore tends to reflect negatively on anyone who they consider to be abnormal. So when I discovered the story of Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld, a gay rights activist and founder of the Institute for the Study of Sexuality, an organization dedicated to the scientific study of human sexuality and gender, I decided that he deserved a place on this list. As a closeted gay man living in the early 20th century, Hirschfeld was often shocked by the German government's harsh treatment of gay and gender nonconforming people. Even before Hitler took power in 1933, homosexuality was condemned under Section 13, paragraph 175 of Germany's law code, which stated that unnatural sexual acts committed between persons of the male sex was punishable by imprisonment. Determined to change public perspectives on gay and gender nonconforming people, Hirschfeld began to study human sexuality and gender, in an attempt to understand and spread awareness about the topic. His work was guided by the motto, "Through science to justice." Unlike many of his colleagues, Hirschfeld promoted the idea that gender and personality were distinct from one another, and that there were many kinds of sexual variations that existed naturally throughout the human population. These sexual intermediaries, as he termed them, could be broadly divided into 3 categories: homosexuals, hermaphrodites, and transvestites, a term which Hirschfeld coined in 1910 to refer to people who either want to dress in the clothes of the opposite sex, or who, from the point of view of their character, should be considered as the opposite sex. While Hirschfeld's work was groundbreaking, especially for the time, in 1919 he decided to go one step further and create the Institute for the Study of Sexuality, which included a museum, offices, a giant library filled with books and research on sexuality and gender, a community center, and a clinic that performed some of the world's first sex reassignment surgeries. However, with the rise of the Nazi Party, things began to change. While the Institute and Hirschfeld's theories had often been the target of public criticism, Hitler saw Hirschfeld and his patients as abnormalities that needed to be removed. On May 6, 1933, Nazi soldiers invaded the Institute, destroying the bulk of Hirschfeld's research and library. You know how there are people out there who say that being transgender is a modern invention, and that there is no historical precedent for it? I give you Exhibit A as to why that's not true. While Hirschfeld was able to escape capture by fleeing to Paris, along with his partner Carl Guisset and his protege Li Shitong, his freedom was short-lived as he died of a stroke just 2 years later in 1935. Though Hirschfeld had initially planned to continue his work while living abroad, the rise and expansion of the Nazi Party forced him to abandon his plans, and it wasn't until over half a century later that the importance of his research and contributions to the LGBTQ+ community were fully appreciated. Born to a wealthy English household in 1882, Adeline Virginia Stephens, unlike most women born in the Victorian era, received a fairly thorough education, read extensively, and grew up in a household where writer was considered an acceptable career choice. Though her early life was marred by tragedy and depression, in 1912 she married Leonard Woolf, and just 3 years later published her debut novel, The Voyage Out, a satirical look at Edwardian life. However, if Virginia was considered a bit unorthodox, at least by Victorian standards, Victoria Sackville West was an absolute rebel. The only daughter of Victoria and Lionel Sackville West, Victoria, aka Vida, often described herself as a rough child who desired to be, as she put it, as much like a boy as possible. While, like Virginia, Vida had expressed an interest in writing from an early age, it wasn't until 1917, while living with her husband, Harold Nicholson, in Constantinople, that she was inspired to write the poems of East and West, launching her career as a writer. After their first encounter at a dinner party in December of 1922, the pair entered into a compelling and often flirtatious friendship. I simply adore Virginia Woolf. And so would you. You'd fall quite flat before her charm and personality. She's quite old. I've rarely taken such a fancy to anyone, and I think she likes me. At least, she's asked me to Richmond, where she lives. Darling, I've quite lost my heart. We had a surprise visit from the Nicholsons. She's a pronounced sappist. And May, thinks Ethel Sands, have an eye on me, old though I am. Though their relationship was initially just platonic, after Vida agreed to publish the book for Hogarth Press, Virginia and Leonard's publishing company, the nature of the relationship began to change. Though it wasn't until 1925, while Vida was traveling with her husband, that Virginia sheepishly revealed her true feelings. While letters and diary entries from this time indicate that the pair shared a loving and sensual relationship, Vida's love for beautiful women meant that she was often romantically involved with more than one woman, or man, at a time. Honestly, she has a list of lovers that would put Anne Lister to shame. During Vida's romantic entanglement with Mary Campbell, Virginia was inspired, either by love or by jealousy, to start writing Orlando, a historical fiction about a dashing nobleman named Orlando who has a number of romantic entanglements, is rejected by a Russian princess, becomes a poet, transforms into a woman at age 30, and then goes on to live for 300 years. As you do. While it was no secret that the main character was based on Vida, especially considering that pictures of her were included along with the text, audiences at the time were surprisingly accepting of Orlando, and the book is now counted among Virginia Woolf's most well-known works. Though there is no evidence that the sensual aspect of Vida and Virginia's relationship continued after the publication of Orlando, the two remained close, exchanging letters and manuscripts until Virginia's suicide on March 28, 1941. I just want to take this chance to apologize in advance because I'm probably going to mispronounce most of the names and terms in this section of the video. Turns out it's really hard to find pronunciation guides for the Crow language. Born in 1854, Oshitish, whose name roughly translates to finds them and kills them, was a member of the Crow Nation, a Native American tribe primarily located in modern-day Montana. Though biologically male, Oshitish was a Bate, a man who assumes the dress, occupation, and manner of the female sex. Though the Bate seem to have occupied a special position within Crow society, Oshitish always insisted that her choice to live as a woman was completely natural, and motivated by her own desires, rather than a role forced on her by society. In 1876, Oshitish, along with a Crow woman named the Other Magpie, took part in the Great Sioux War, fighting alongside General George Crook at the Battle of the Rosebud. Though it was unusual for women and Bate to participate in armed conflict, both Oshitish and the other magpie survived the battle, even taking an enemy's scalp as a trophy. However, after the end of the Great Sioux War, things began to go downhill for Oshitish. During this period, Oshitish, along with other Bate, were often harassed by settlers and Indian agents, individuals authorized to interact with Native American tribes on behalf of the government, who tried to force them to adopt masculine dress and ways of living. Oshitish herself was arrested on several occasions, despite protests that her behavior, and that of the other Bate, was completely natural. However, despite pressure to conform to masculine standards, Oshitish refused to alter her way of living, as she continued to dress in women's clothes and even won several blue ribbons at county fairs for her sewing and cooking skills. While Oshitish's death in 1929 in many ways marked the end of the Bate tradition, which was often condemned by future generations as being abnormal, thank you residential schools. There is now a concentrated effort to acknowledge and understand the existence of two-spirit people, like Oshitish, within Native North American culture. Two-spirit, an umbrella term which is coined by activist Albert McLeod to bridge the gap between Western and Indigenous understandings of gender and sexuality, is generally used to refer to another gender role that is believed to be common among most, if not all, Native societies in North America. Since the term's inception in 1990, organizations like the East Coast Two-Spirit Society and the Edmonton Two-Spirit Society have emerged with the intent of educating the public about two-spirit traditions. Well, at least one of these ended on a happy note. Kinda. Well, I'm Silver Jade, and as always, I must ask you to please remember that Nazis and colonialism really suck. Oh, and also please remember to support your local library. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, I hope I'll see you again next time.